Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for March of 2019. As you can see by the video length, we have a lot to discuss. I have 15 albums up for discussion, so let's go ahead and drive through them all. I only want to disappear. A lot of people seem to have a lot of frustration with this record, and understandably so. Weezer were on a really nice uptick with their last couple of records outside of Pacific Daydream being some of the best material Weezer had been putting out in years. And then they made Pacific Daydream, and it seems we're kind of in a weird cyclical place where Weezer's doing what they did back in the late 2000s by releasing album after album after album. And while people have been kind of throwing this around as one of their worst, I would disagree to a strong degree, and I know that some of these statements in support of the record are purely my taste. That's where my kind of taste comes in, but I enjoy tracks like Byzantine and Too Many Thoughts in My Head, and if I'm just being honest, to a small degree. I really enjoyed Byzantine a lot more than people seem to enjoy it in the general masses. And that groove on I'm Just Being Honest is so tight. I can't stop revisiting it. So that's why I would definitely think that that's especially a small case where my taste kind of factors in. But I agree with the general populace. This thing starts off really strongly. I enjoy the first couple of tracks on here. I think High as a Kite would have fit snug into the White Album completely. And I think Zombie Bastards and Can't Knock the Hustle are great reinterpretations of Weezer's sound into other avenues within the alternative sphere. You know, I think Zombie Bastard sounds like kind of a fun indie hit that would have struck a chord in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. Sounds like some shit Jonathan Colton would have written, if I'm being honest. And Can't Knock the Hustle totally sounds like some earlier than that kind of throwback sound that I really enjoy. I will agree. I think the album kind of loses steam with Living in LA and Piece of Cake. I think those songs are okay, but they're not the best Weezer songs, and I also don't enjoy The Prince Who Wanted Everything. California Snow, while a grower, to say the least, it's not a song that I would say I walk away from wholly loving, but The Prince Who Wanted Everything definitely might be one of Weezer's worst songs to date. Which is surprising how much of a mess this is, because it's weird to think that just 3 years ago they were crafting some of their best material. And even the Teal album wasn't terrible. I mean, you guys saw it. I thought it was a solid covers record. And I think that because of its inconsistencies within its track listing, this is also just a solid Weezer record at the end of the day. I do like this thing more than a lot of my peers do. I give this thing like a 6 out of 10. It's not terrible. It's not the worst thing by any of the stretch of the imagination, but they've definitely made a lot better than this. Now, I'll be honest, this is the first full-length album I've listened to from Hozier. I thought Take Me to Church was okay. It wasn't my favorite song to come out of the year that it dropped, and it didn't entice me to listen to his record. But I figured, hey, this is dropping. It was his first album in a while. Maybe it would be a bit of a surprise. And it kind of is to some degree. There's a lot on here I wasn't expecting from the Take Me to Church guy. Like the very fun to noise-making and the almost twangy Dinner and Diatribes with its like southern-rooted guitar playing. But there was some stuff on here that did feel like, okay, this is definitely something the Take Me to Church guy would make, like Wasteland Baby, the really great closer, Wasteland Baby, and tracks like Would That I. But even with the more interesting stuff in mind, there's a lot on here that is just immediately forgettable. Like, I've sat down with this thing a handful of times, and outside of some of the tracks that I mentioned, and the fantastic opener, Nina Cried Power. I think Nina Cried Power is the strongest track here, and it showcases a lot of Hozier's strengths, like his power in his voice, which is used to a great effect throughout other parts of the record. I will say that he belts really well, but a lot of this just isn't sticking with me. I think that the instrumentals are fine, and I think that when he hits those ethereal, grand moments, they feel like some bands that I really enjoy, like Algiers, just in a very rootsy sound. But unfortunately, outside of the instrumentation and Hozier's voice outside of a few tracks, I think that this thing is very forgettable. Which isn't, again, I feel bad for saying that, because the guy is clearly talented. There's some really nice guitar playing here, and some of the writing here I really enjoy, but I wish it was a little more sticky. It was a little more mentally sticky. Maybe that's just a preference thing. I do think this thing is solid. I think that it could have been a lot worse. He could have done a lot worse things to his sound, and it feels like even if I hadn't listened to his first record, this feels very in line with his style, and I appreciate that, and I respect that a lot. Ultimately, I don't see myself coming back to this thing a whole lot, outside of maybe some of the highlights that I had mentioned, because I do like his voice. He's got a really stern voice. I give this thing like 6 out of 10. Again, it's another really solid record. I don't think it's as dynamic as the Black Album, but I feel like it doesn't need to be. It's not trying to be. I feel like this is just Hozier trying to stay true to himself, and I respect the guy for that, like I said.
Take it on home and they feeling all the way. Taking on shots and they feel.
While this thing takes a couple tracks to really get started, I think Solange's When I Get Home is a really good record. I feel like people are kind of sleeping on this one a little bit, but I enjoy a lot of the atmosphere on here. I like a lot of the Houston-sounding instrumentals that are on this thing, but I like that she channels that into a very lustful and illustrious soundscape. I really love the first leg of this record a lot. Like Down with the Click and Way to the Show are really nice interpolations of that sound into a more experimental realm. I even think some of the features on here that I wouldn't normally listen to on my own sound really good on here, like Playboy Cardi and Gucci Mane on their respective songs. I think that they fit the atmospheres that Solange is pulling together really well, and I think that her voice just kind of melds with these instrumentals really, really solidly. I'm kind of floored that people don't really like this as much as I do, but I love the really nice fusions of some of the trap instrumentals with that kind of low-tone Houston sound with this really nice voice that she has. And man, you can't tell me you can't listen to Gerard without fucking just rocking along with her layered vocals and the way that she just kind of sings on, and it's so playful. You know, there's a lot of whimsy in these dreary, drenched, and reverb atmospheres that I just think are so fucking fresh, man. I kind of slept on her last record, but I have listened to some tracks from that, and I enjoy it, and I like this just as much. I mean, I give this thing like an 8 out of 10. It's a damn good record, man. I get it's a little excessive with its interludes. Tracks like Beltway, while very beautiful, feel more like elongated interludes, but they add a lot to the atmosphere, man. It coats the record in this consistent tone that keeps it loose. If you just lose the interludes, it'd still feel just as loose, man. This was a suggestion by my buddy G-Man Yoki, the man, the Garrett, the Yokester, and he suggested this album, You Are the Sky, by this band Weed, and I didn't know what to expect. I looked at the track listing, I looked at the genres, and I was like, well, this can either go one of two ways. This can either be really ambitious and really fun, or it could be boring. And I really enjoyed this thing. It seems to be the former, you know? While I think this album takes a couple tracks to really get started, I like the opening in I See You, and some nice instrumentation there, but I feel like the record really picks up with Where Did You Go? I love the atmosphere of that song, and I love the tone of it, and a lot of the tone in this record reminds me of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard in a great way. I love the way this band sounds, and one of the things that sets them apart from that band is their bass work and how lush their bass sounds. It almost reminds me of Les Claypool in a really, really cool way. And I think that it's a nice record. It's really cool. It's really nice to just sink into and chill with some really nice solo work to keep the longer songs more interesting, and these songs have passages to keep the listener engaged. It helps these guys have an embracing of math rock injected into their psychedelic tinges, which adds this other nuance of technicality with these psychedelic atmospheres, instead of just being these ambient drolls of monotony. You know, I feel like some of the later tracks aren't as consistent as others. Like Open Door is fine, but it feels like this really weird footnote in between amidst a bunch of grand psychedelic epics. You know, I feel like the scope is fully realized with this band, and they have a really nice tone, but they get a little mixed up with, they get a little too deep into their ideologies and their sounds and their tones. But it's a solid bunch of guys here, man. The music that they make is really fucking dope. And I'm a big fan of that whole psychedelic tinge, man. I think it works. I mean, fucking look at me. I like shit like this. It kind of ticks a button for me really, really well. And it reminds me of bands that I really enjoy without feeling too derivative, if that makes any sense. I mean, it's a band called Weed. What else can you expect? It's going to be really trippy. It's going to be really psychedelic. There's going to be a lot of weird imagery in the lyrics. And it's going to be a trip. And it's a pretty nice trip. Like, I could see myself sitting down and just enjoying this under certain circumstances. I give this thing, like, I'm feeling like an 8, maybe a 9. Like, I'm feeling really good on this thing. Each re-listen, I like certain aspects more than others. It kind of depends on my day. I'm going to sit it at an 8. I'm happy with an 8. I'm going to keep it at an 8.
Click like a good time.
Honest, I don't like 2 Chainz. Like, he's never been a dude that I'm, like, clamoring to listen to. I think some of his feature work is okay. He's a good hype man. But, like, none of his solo work has kept me engaged or has interested me in really any capacity. I checked this out because I like its album cover. I think it's a really bold album cover. And I like the title, Rap or Go to the League. It sets a better tone for a record that I would like to hear from 2 Chainz. And I feel like he hits it to some degree. I think that some of the tracks on here are a lot better than I would expect them to be, given that they're 2 Chainz. I love the opener, Forgiven. I love Threat to Society. Even Mama, I Hit a Lick, with Kendrick's really good feature. It's great. But there's some shit on here that does not do anything for me. I don't like the Favorite Things sample, especially when it's not on the song with Ariana Grande. So the presence of Ariana Grande and the sample of Favorite Things, a song that she sampled on 7 Rings, it feels weird. There's a lot of weird tonal things going on in some parts of this track listing. And then the Travis Scott song is fine. I think it doesn't fit the tone of most of the record to a large degree, but it's fine. It is what it is. It's a good song, at least. And I really like the track with Chance and even Kodak Black, who I don't really listen to Kodak Black. He gives a decent feature here, you know, but it's just inconsistent, man. I think it's interesting that for a dude who's known as a hook man, because he's a hook artist on a lot of people's songs, some of the hooks on here are weak sauce, like NCAA, or like a $2 bill, or that weird-ass sample of Favorite Things on I Said Me. It's not what I was wanting. I was wanting a much more focused record from 2 Chainz, and it seemed like it was going in that direction, but every time I revisited it, I was just disappointed by the time, like, High Top Versace came on. Like, it's fine, but it's not what I wanted from this record. But it's solid. It's more solid than I was expecting it to be. Doing it again, throwing another 6 out there. It's the month of the 6s. That's what March was. There was a lot of 6s going around this month. A lot of solid work. Nothing that was really blowing me away. There was a lot of shit in some of these records that I wouldn't see myself revisiting. But what I liked that was here was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. The next album I checked out is a split record from Cloud Rat and The World is a Vampire. Now, Cloud Rat is a band I've been following since 2015. They were on the first listening log, and I loved their record. It was their last solo outing they've done so far. Quiffloff? It's got a weird name, but they are a grindcore crust punk band, and I'll be honest, I really enjoyed their sound. I think their singer Madison is just a fucking wrecking ball of energy and force, and I was fully impressed with their sound. They treaded the crust punk grindcore scene perfectly. They had a lot of more down-tempo moments. They struck a good balance of denseness with a sparse soundscape that was really brittle. And I was looking forward to more of that with this split. And oddly enough, they use the split to their advantage because they really keep a lot of their stuff super fucking dense. Like, it gets a little sparse at points, but a lot of the songs here are tight. They're very just dense and aggressive. It's like a pummeling force of aggression. Outside of the opener especially, Wishmade has this beautiful piano melody, and Madison sings, and I was shocked that then just evolves into Nago that just continuously assaults the listener with blast beats and dry guitars that sound like a buzzsaw to the face. And it's so nice. And these World with the Vampire guys are really fucking good. They more make up for the sludgier, kind of down-tempo, sort of hardcore edge stuff. It's less grindcore with The World as a Vampire, and I like that about it. It's a nice dichotomy from the madness that Cloud Rat is pulling out on all fronts here. They pull no punches with their aggression, and The World as a Vampire makes up for that with some slower, more methodical hits to you with a vocalist that's just as raw, just as gritty, and provides a good complement to Cloud Rat's sound. And while I haven't listened to the other two splits that they have done in the last couple of years, they have me enticed to do so because this is an immediate purchase for me. I fucking adore this record, and I love the way it sounds. I love its cover art, too. It's one of the best cover arts I've seen this year so far. But this is a strong 9. This is a great record. For the same reasons I liked Portal last year, I like this split record for the same reasons this year, if not because it's a little different. It's still very dense, it's still very dry, but it's also encompassing, enticing. Now to flip that on its script, the new In Flames record doesn't really do a whole lot for me. There's some passages that kind of remind me of their earlier work, and I'm talking earlier like their late 2000s work, not their mid 2000s, pre 2000s work, which is the In Flames that I really enjoy. I used to love these guys. I listened to them a lot back in high school, and while I fell off of the discography after a certain point, when I started doing these listening logs, I started to listen to their music again, and had been very disappointed with what I was finding because man, they are a far cry from the Jester Race and Horacle. And there are some cuts that I do like from this thing. Like the opener Voices is a fine, passable version of their 2000 stuff. And even the title track, I the Mask and I Am Above do a good job at almost reinterpreting their old sound into a newer spectrum. And Follow Me has a really nice acoustic intro that blends into a pretty decent cut. But some of this shit just does not work for me in the worst way. I mean, This Is Our House really encapsulates that I feel so out of touch with In Flames, which probably means that I am not the target demo for them anymore, which is fine. If they want to go for that sound, but it makes this thing sound very milquetoast and very forgettable in a very different way than Hozier's record was. While I can respect the personal touch Hozier brings to this music, I don't feel that same personal touch with this In Flames record. You know, it doesn't feel like the band that I fell in love with like 10 years ago in so many different ways. I get if they still have a calling for this, but I haven't heard any In Flames fans praising this thing, and every revisit I give to this thing, it just leads me with less and less returns. You know, I feel like I liked more of this record when I first started listening to it than I do now. And in fact, my rating continues to go down. So I'm going to leave it where it is now. I have it at a 4, because I don't think it's worse than a 4. They're competent musicians. They're capable musicians. They're just not as compelling as they used to be. Their songwriting isn't as compelling as it used to be. And they're not using their musicianship in any interesting and dynamic ways. They're just presenting this very bland, melodic metalcore with a slight, very, very slight mellow death tinge. I know I just made the comparison to Killswitch Engage, but this actually also reads more like a late Incubus record. It's got the tracks that are very indebted to their early fans with a lot of newer shit that is a lot smoother and mellower than their late shit in the worst way.
It's all about the fame. Whoa, yeah.
Now, this record is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, and it was a request by my buddy Scott, the infamous Scott that's done the Aaron Carter review. He requested Neo Yokio and Kingdom Hearts 3. He's got a really good way of incorporating the past or my taste in a weird way in here. Zebrahead were a band that I was aware of growing up. Some of their songs were in my rotation to some degree, but out of the skate punk, pop punk realm of the late 90s, early 2000s, they were not a band that I listened to that much. There were other bands like Blink-182 that I was more into, and man, there are some points on here where it sounds like they still got it. All My Friends Are Nobodies, Chasing the Sun, Each Ni Sanshi, fucking Do Your Worst, all have Party on the Dance Floor, all have sections that still harken back to that old stuff really, really well. Up in Smoke is just a weed reggae ska tune. Like I said about weed, that shit is fine with me. But fuck, this record stinks of midlife crisis in the worst way. They never strayed from incorporating rap a la 311 into their shit, but man, they go full rapcore on just about every song here, and it ruins so many of them, all of them. And there's some just straight up rapcore cuts on here, and it fucking sucks because there is some true potential here. Like, I sent one of these songs to John and Hannah because instrumentally it is so up their alley. They are all about that pop punk, skate punk shit, but I cannot recommend this to anybody because of all of that rapcore shit. And like In Flames, the more I've sat with this, the more that I truly fucking hate what it is. Like, I'm disappointed because it's like you're given a nice hamburger and it's got mustard in it. I fucking hate mustard. It'll ruin just about everything you put it on. And it's a very personal taste, I know. And I'm a guy who doesn't hate rap metal, and there's some merit to that genre and some of the new metal shit, but it does not suit this style well. And rapcore died so long ago, guys. Hang up the fucking towel with that shit. 3 out of 10. This thing sucks. God damn it, Scott. Like In Flames, I used to listen to Children of Bodom a lot in high school. The only difference between Bodom and In Flames is while I liked them, I was not as into them as I was in Flames. I think Bodom have a solid discography, and they do a lot of good things within even some of their weaker records. And on Hexed, that is very much the case. The one thing I wasn't expecting was the power metal lean. Like, they were toying with that when I dropped off their boat in around Blood Drunk, which I haven't listened to anything that they put out since Blood Drunk, but damn, do they just go full power metal with Alexi's vocals staying exactly the same? Which, I mean, I get it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this kind of makes them like the AC/DC of that scene. But fuck, man, it is so average it hurts. Like, the guitar work is fine. The hooks on some of these songs, like the title track Hexed and This Road, are cool. They're fine. They're nosebleed reachers. They really hit that demo well of that power metal with a slightly gravelly twist. But like In Flames and to a similar degree to Hozier, I walk away from this thing every time with diminishing returns. Like, it's fine. If you like this, I understand. I just would have hoped that they would have done a little more to branch out their sound. I would have even taken a bigger doubling down of the power metal shtick, because I like power metal to a small degree. One of my favorite bands in the metal scene is Iced Earth, and they're a power metal band by every stretch of the imagination. And like I said, I like Bodom's earlier work, but what made Bodom's work more compelling is the production. They were more produced like a black metal band that took some of the writing cues from power metal. And on this, they take the writing and the cues from power metal and the production of power metal, but they try so hard to stay in that cult scene that they flourished out of. Great example, actually, of what exactly I mean is the song Hecate's Nightmare. It has the musings and the codings of an old school Bodom song with the production of a new school Bodom song, and those ideas don't mix. It's like the battle system and the adventure parts of Ocarina of Time. You know, Ego Raptor says they don't mix. I disagree to some degree, but it's the same kind of feeling that gives Ego Raptor, this gives me. And it sounds really mismatched, and it sounds like they're not it sounds stagnant. Like, I was kind of surprised at how very Bodom this sounded, but like a watered down version of it, which kind of sucks. Like, I want more from this band. I think that they're fine. I think that they're competent. But it was a little upsetting. It was a little heartbreaking to see this band that I thought was pretty solid put out one of their more tepid releases that I've ever heard. And that makes me afraid to listen to everything that came out between this and Blood Drug, because I'm assuming it'll make Hexed look even worse. But as it stands, I have this out of 5. It's not terrible. It's very average. But, you know, c'est la vie. More power to him, much love to him, but this, I wanted so much more. This was a record I was pretty amped for. I think Fallujah's last record was a surprise sleeper hit for me last year, or the year that it dropped. Dreamless had this nice melding of technical death, some slight post-metal tendencies with more of a focus on readapting gent for the modern age. There was some ambient passages, there was some jazzy guitar playing. That was kind of surprising to see. Like, it had some of the production tropes of gent, but it wasn't tied down to all of the compositional tropes that coat a gent record. I mean, it's what made me listen to the Periphery record that year, which is a band that I stopped caring about years ago. And with Undying Light, unfortunately, this is just far less interesting. Like, they abandon the jazz shit altogether, and the ambience really only pops up on a couple of songs, and it's in really sparse use, like in Eyes Like the Sun and Distant and Cold, which are near the end of the record. What Fallujah really focuses on this more is just crushing density. And it comes across in some songs, like The Ocean Above. I fucking love that song. I think that it's so dense, so aggressive, in all of the right ways. And their vocalists, while they don't really get melodic, they do on some tracks, like Sanctuary, and there's some coatings of it throughout other parts of the record, especially those ambient pieces. A majority of the record, it's just all-out, sheer gravelly aggression. And while I enjoy that, and I think it works for some bands, to Fallujah's credit, what I liked the most about them was that they kept things interesting. And while they cut a lot of the jazz and sparse ambience, that also means they cut their songs down. And a lot of the songs on here just feel like a lot more simplistic ideas than what we're seeing on their previous outing. I will say their production on their bass, though, fucking nice. I'm glad that you can hear the bass on this, and that it's a very dynamic bass sound, unlike some metal bands in this style where it's just another cog in the depth machine. And their drummer is fucking playing his ass off. His fills on here, fucking as erratic as ever, man. I think there's still a nice focus on aggression here, and I think the doubling down on that does them some sort of service. They're a lot better at keeping things dense and aggressive by mixing in some of those post-metal aspects later in the record, and they spice up the runtime, but it still just left me wishing I was listening to Dreamless, because that was a much more interesting runtime. There was more vocal dynamics. There was more band dynamics. It just feels like a brick that keeps smacking you in the face. that doesn't do a whole lot to mix up how it smacks you in the face. Still really solid. I don't hate this thing. It is a bit of a disappointment, though, because I was wanting so much more from these guys. I will say, for this being their second record from Nuclear Blast, this sounds more like a Nuclear Blast production. If you're familiar with the records that are out on that label, you kind of know what I mean. Which is kind of upsetting, because like I said, these guys had some really interesting stuff. But this gets a 6 out of 10. It's still really solid, and I'll see myself revisiting some of the tracks that I really love from this thing, but I won't probably be revisiting this collective project as much as I would have liked to have as the year goes on.
It hit me like a sucker punch. Just wanna look and I'm out of touch.
There's another case where an artist's music video was playing at work, and I decided to check out the album of that artist. It also was an album that was receiving pretty high praise from my buddy John from ARTV. So I figured I would just also put my 2 cents in, because, hey, I've liked some of the stuff we play at work. It's not common, but it happens. And this is a case where I like it. I like Sigrid's Sucker Punch a decent amount. The one thing I don't like about hearing these songs at work is they sound completely different on the records, because I'm hearing them through TV speakers and like all at once, so it's like this cacophonous version of the song that has like delays and stuff. But when I sat down and really listened to even the title track, I walked away really enjoying it. Like, I think that the verses work a lot better than they originally did when I heard it the first time. And that chorus, man, it is an aptly named song. It just smacks you like a sucker punch, man. And not only that, it alludes to a lot of the lyrics on here that are very personal feeling, which I really enjoy. A lot of songs about intimacy and love, like Mine Right Now. I like the sentiment of Mine Right Now. You know, it feels very youthful, as does a lot of the record. I like a lot of the hook work on this thing. Outside of Sucker Punch, Don't Feel Like Crying has a really great hook. I like the very fast, rhythmic hook. I think that it's really fun, and it reminds me more of a pop tune that would have existed in, like, the early 90s or, like, the late 2000s. Like, a lot of this record, when it's not using instrumentation to feel a little more personal and indie, it's using synthesizers to its effect to create this very electro-pop atmosphere that almost reminds me of LaRue, but in a different way. And I kind of like that. We need a voice like LaRue in the modern pop sphere. I really like this thing. I could see myself revisiting it as the year goes on. I think it's really solid. I think as the record goes on, it starts to lose steam a little bit. I get the sentiment of a song like Don't Kill My Vibe and Business Dinners, but they're 2 of my least favorite songs on the record, and they're back-to-back, which is shocking because it follows In Vain, which is another one of my favorite cuts on the record. So the record just kind of gets a little less consistent as it goes on. But maybe as I listen to it more, I'll like those songs too. But where I'm at with it now, I think it's really solid. I give it like a 7 out of 10. It's a really nice, fun pop record in a time where we don't have that too often at the moment.
In my eyes, but you can't even speak. Look at the information I done stumbled on. I just come and go all the time. You know how it is.
You know, every year on the listening log, I usually keep in touch, like, by listening to acts that I used to love in every genre. You know, as I talked about metal from my high school days, I also talk about hip-hop from my college days. And Dizzy Wright's one of those dudes I got into back in like 2010, 2011 that I kind of liked. He had a really mellow flow. He had a really good ear for good instrumentals. And he was signed to a label that at the time I really enjoyed. As the years have gone on, a lot of the other Hobson crew guys, or former Hobson crew guys from Funk Volume, I listen to less and less. But Dizzy's always been a dude that's kept it consistent. While I haven't loved all of his records, he's been pretty stagnant. Or as far as he's been pretty, like, good. Like, he's been solid at making solid records. And Nobody Cares Work Harder is another iteration of that. even if I don't like the songs, like Champagne Service, Lay Low, and even Period, I'm not the biggest fans of, but they have some nice instrumentals. I like the really weird synth work on Period, and I love when he spits over some lush shit, dude. And sometimes he pulls that shit together with some really nice songs as well, like a Melanated Kings, which has a really nice feature from Nowadays, providing some reggae infusion into that. He's got that track Slow Down with Shalel, who has a really nice voice. She suits that lush instrumental really, really well. And the closer, I Made Sure with Burner and Currency. Again, super lush instrumental that has a really mellow flow that works with Dizzy really, really well. He plays to his strengths and a couple of hefty doses on here. But there's a handful of tracks here that are pretty milquetoast by Dizzy standards. The other tracks I mentioned, Check Me Out, even Grateful with Tech, like, it's fine. It's just very of the same ilk that the rest of Dizzy Wright's material is. They're the tracks that I would assume to be there, and they're fine. I like that they're there. The track with Futuristic is decent. The track with Jaren is decent. I don't know. I'm surprised, because again, I'm not wholly loving this thing, but I think that for how long it is, it breezes through its runtime really smoothly. It's a solid hip-hop record. Like, if you're a fan of Dizzy, you probably really love this thing. As a fan of Dizzy, I like this thing a lot. And I think that it's just another notch on the belt of an artist who seems to continuously keep it consistent. There's some attempts at, like, woke lyrics on here with, like, Self-Love is Powerful, which some of them work, some of them don't. I like that he's continuing to branch out his lyrical topics, while keeping well indebted to what kept him started to begin with. And he's making the right moves to keep a solid career out there. I personally give this thing a 6. Again, really nice record, really good. Again, really chill record, really smooth. It's got enough dynamics to keep the listener not bored. But I'm wanting something else. I'm wanting some more branching out. I want him to reach out to other dudes and get other dudes on his records. I want to see him push that boundary even more for himself, The next record I'm checking out is another request, this time from Random Rock and Road Riffs and Reviews, dedicated viewer of the channel, and he requested the latest Devin Townsend record, Empath. And I'm a pretty moderate Devin Townsend fan. I do like what I've heard from his catalog. I haven't heard everything because the dude is a very prolific artist in the metal scene, but I like that he's a wacky, weird dude. He's like the bizarro counterpoint to a dude like Maynard James Keenan, who is like not prolific but also has that scope to his music. And on Empath, we see him embracing his bizarreness tenfold and create such an all-encompassing experience. I really like this thing. I like this thing a shit ton. I like that you don't know what you're gonna get next, and while I don't think every odd vignette pays off, a majority of them do. Castaway, I love its laid-back opening before Genesis really erupts into this just maddening shriek down the rabbit hole. I think that a lot of these songs do a good job at creating this not cacophonous, but again, all-encompassing atmosphere. The production on this thing is so pristine, yet everything feels so bombarding. And I think that's Devin Townsend's MO. I think that's his idea, is he wants to create this sound all-embracing, and I mean, on tracks like Hear Me, I just felt myself like just so wowed by how everything was so dynamic, yet everything was also so fucking loud, but not in an exhausting way. it's not an exhausting listen because they do a good job at mixing it up, whether it be through children's choirs or weird symphonic vignettes, or Devin Townsend decides to put on some really show-tuney vocals. Like, there's a lot here that fits, and I feel like the album really culminates to its last couple of tracks, which are these big, progressive epics that get the job done. I mean, the closer, Singularity, is a 23-minute, track, but it doesn't feel like a chore to sit through. Like, sure, there are some moments that are better than others, but as a whole, it's a really gratifying listen, and I feel like because the record kind of keeps it short and brief for progressive metal standards, before building up to that, it lets the listener get acquainted with Devin Townsend's MO. This is a nice starter record for Devin Townsend, if you ask me. There's other records of his that I like more, but this is a good slice of what to expect from Devin Townsend. You're going to get something abrasive, you're going to get something wacky, you're going to get something progressive, you're going to get maybe some symphonics in there, you're going to get a lot of dynamics in there, and I feel like it works. I revisited tracks like Sprite less the more that I revisited this record, but I still can't discredit that song isn't at least interesting. It's an interesting listen, to say the least. And I really enjoyed this thing. And I thank you, Random Rock Roaders and Views, for requesting this record, because it was on my list. It was in my radar. I just kind of pulled it up to the forefront because it was requested. And I'm glad that it was, because this is a fun listen. This is a really fun listen, and it reminded me why I like dudes like Devin Townsend, because I like the weird, I like the wacky, and I like the zany. I give this an 8 out of 10. It's a really good release. It's a really good record.
Tell me love is endless, though.
And the last record I listened to was not a request, but a popular, voted on record. I knew I had a lot of records coming out at the end of the month, and I wasn't going to be able to get to them all, so I threw 2 ones up that I knew I was going to have to talk about eventually, and that I was kind of looking forward to talking about to some degree, and this one by a landslide. This completely steamrolled the other option, which I'll be talking about next month, the other record. But I'll be honest, I wasn't very excited for this record. I did not like most of the lead-up singles to this. I didn't like You Should See Me in the Crown, which I didn't even know was a lead-up to this. It sounded like Diet Taylor Swift Reputation era. Still does, just not a track I really like. And Bury a Friend, I really didn't like, because it was like a pop twist on Black Skinhead from Yeezus. I don't like Yeezus, so I didn't like that song. I will say, though, to its credit, it's very catchy. And while I normally do not say catchiness is a good thing, and this is not the type of earworm I want in my head, but I think that to its credit for how minimal the song is, Billie's singing is very infectious on that song. I like the bridge of it, because it is different from the Yeezus stuff. It separates itself from that. But the rest of the song is as catchy as that. But I did like Wish You Were Gay. I thought it was a solid tune. And it showed a nice separation from the other 2 promotional singles, which would lead the listener to believe that this record would be very dynamic. And it is. I think that she does the softer moments better on other parts of the records, like Listen Before I Go and Ilo Milo, which shout out to that title, because that's shout out, much love for the title, because that game, yeah. But where I feel like this record falls is in its middle section. I think it's quirky that she sampled The Office on My Strange Addiction, but I personally don't care, and I didn't like that song. While 8 does the interpolation of the acoustic soft shit that I like on later in the record, I don't like her voice in it. I just don't. Maybe it'll grow on me, but I did not enjoy her singing on that song. I like the composition. I like the ukulele. I like the very twee pop influenced sound of that, and again, it provides another notch on the belt of like difference of separation from the rest of the record. I will say, while I don't love the full product, I like the idea of a song like Zanny. I like that she pulls, and I'm using a comparison that other people have made of her, but in a different way. She's doing what Lorde did on Pure Heroine with her observation of the pop scene on Royals, but in Billie's case, she's doing it to speak against Xanax culture, drug culture, and I like that because Billie's aesthetic and her vibe really fits in with that scene, and I like that she's going against that to speak out on drug addiction in a positive way. And I like that that's a discussion that she's throwing out there. That's a thread she's throwing out there. I really think that she has at least a scope and a vision, and it's something to be said because she and her brother did all of this, and that's commendable. But I don't think it's all that consistent with its cobblings together. I feel like she had a lot of ideas and she wanted to explore them all in one big swoop, and I feel like this will be successful for her. It has this very loose feel that I feel like, to its credit, I respect, and I respect that ambition, but I don't think it fully comes together to me. I'm glad that my peers are really enjoying this record more than I am. I'm glad that people are giving this accolades, because there's some instances on here where I feel like that her scope is fully realized. But I feel like where Billie will really thrive is if she continues down this path. I'm not here to shit talk this record, because even though I don't like it as a complete package, I do think that there's potential here to make something even better. Like I said, I'm not completely into her singing style. I don't think it works on a handful of tracks. It's like a weird twist on a subculture within indie that I don't like, the whole Lana Del Rey scene. I'm not into that, and her interpolation of that doesn't always work for me. Bad Guy's another instance where I like the instrumental, but I don't like her performance on it. But I feel like for someone to pull this out and for it to be successful is a good thing. But I personally, given this a 6, it's solid. And I know I've given a lot of 6s this month. This is solid. And this album is either going to grow with me as the year goes on, or it's going to fall into obscurity. I know this is wholly a personal thing, a personal preference thing. This is where that subjectivity comes fully into the front. But yeah, this isn't bad. This really isn't bad. It's not as bad as I was thinking it was going to be, given some of the promotional singles and the marketing behind this. That's my thoughts on When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? And the rest of the records I checked out in March. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you would like to request an album for this segment, leave it in the comments below. Linked in the description is my listening log if you want to see what I've listened to already or what I have on my radar, just to let you know what I'm already planning to get to. If you would like to see one of those come up, feel free to do that. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go. I have been Viral Rag. You guys have good days, lots of situations, and I'll see you another day.